If we look back what happened in Libya, if we look what happened in the Middle East in the past, if we look at the Muslim Brotherhood, if we look at al-Qaeda, we have to take this into consideration. But obviously, we do not know yet who the good guys are. So with that, I'm going to ask Secretary Kerry.
Congressman, let me respond to that.
Okay, would you do it quickly,
please? The
please?
focus is not on good guys, bad guys. The focus is on a narrowly drafted resolution asking authorization from the Congress.
I wouldn't think good guys would be using the gas.
Well, that in a lot of ways is at the heart of the split in Washington tonight, and it's a complicated coalitions and so many more undecideds than firm yeses or nos at the moment. You got a sense from Pennsylvania Republican Tom Marino, you just heard, and also if you look at the polls, what a whole lot of Americans feel on this. They just don't know who to trust when it comes to Syria, and they just don't know how, if this starts, it will end. We are putting our trust, though, in our panelists tonight. Bill O'Reilly, Republican consultant, Executive Vice President, NLO Strategies, columnist at Newsday, and one of the good guys here, Dominic Carter. Well, I guess good guy. Political journalist and author. We're going to get into some of the races close to home as well with him. Chris Shays, former Connecticut Congressman, Distinguished Fellow in Public Service at the University of New Haven. Andrew Whitman, you've already met, and Congressman, you went to Iraq more than any other lawmaker. You were there at some of the heart of these similar debates here. You heard from Congressman Marino. He also went off in a back and forth with Hagel where he said, I'm sick of seeing body bags coming home. I'm sick of seeing soldiers disfigured. And when Hagel tried to make the point, listen, it's in the resolution. It will be. There'll be no boots on the ground. He said, I've heard this before. There is a level of fatigue and distrust, not just in Congress, but it seems in the general public. Is that the biggest thing that Congress is wrestling with right now?
Can we just agree, first off, this is a huge mess based on a lot of mistakes that even go back to, our being in Iraq. So I think the president is sending mixed messages, which is deadly. Carter did that. Russians went into Afghanistan. We sent a mixed message to Saddam, and he then went into Kuwait because he didn't think we'd get him out. So then that argues, well, we drew a red, that line, and you better not cross it. We better act. Having said that, so who do we support? Iran, Hezbollah, Syria? Or do we support the Muslim Brotherhood, al-Qaeda, and so-called...
And just a question, do you have to make that decision before you even do just tactical strikes?
Well, but then let's figure out what we're ending up doing. Who are we supporting? What will be the outcome of doing it? Will this ultimately result in Syria, flaring out and attacking Israel and drawing Israel in, and then will the Muslim community then kind of feel badly about us and then oppose Israel? I mean, it is one huge mess. So having said that, good luck, Congress.
Well, but is the calculation, I'm putting you back in Congress, I'm sorry, I like you, but I'm still doing this to you, that you have to decide the consequences, because part of the debate is, listen, we got the destroyers off the coast here. We're going to fire Tomahawks. We're not in this for regime change. We're not in this, nor will we target the chemical weapons themselves. But there is a red line in the international community that we all accepted. This is a response to the chemical warfare, not about what happens next.
So what will the Tomahawk missiles do?
Yeah.
So ask, what will they do? Now, if in the end we decapitate his ability to fly, then we clearly have helped the so-called freedom fighters, al-Qaeda, some pretty messy people. So, I don't agree that because the president said a red line that we have to support him, because too much time has passed. Now, you could make an argument, support a resolution that says if it happens again, the president should act immediately. But the question is, if we do this, will it happen again because we did it?
Would we all agree we would have been better served, the president, I think internationally, that if after the gas and they got the body count to 1,500 people here, and they said with pretty definitive information it was Assad, that we did the strikes then instead of waiting and then bring it back here, and then we would have been better off at that point before Parliament even voted in London.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I want to read you a few quotes in succession from lawmakers in Washington, and then get your sense, not where the vote goes from here, but what in the end can or should be done to change any minds here? And again, this is a sampling here, and it gets from everything from the isolationist perspective to those talking, as Congressman Shays did, about consequences, and then about the broader region here. So let's start with Rand Paul here, who's been the poster child, if you will, for the isolationist portion of the argument, who says, if the rebels win, will they be American allies? I'm not convinced anybody on the Islamic side will be American allies. This next comment here coming from Rick Nolan, who's a Democrat, and he comes from Minnesota. He said, we risk danger to our ally Israel, involvement by the Russians and the Iranians, and blowback to the United States by radical groups operating in the region. And finally, this comment from Lamar Alexander, a senator from Tennessee, one of the more sober voices, I would argue, in the Senate, who said, I'm concerned about the consequences of a strike in Syria and what happens with step 2, step 3, and step 4 after that. And Bill, it seems that when people are trying to figure out how to vote on this, forget the political calculations, we'll get into that next segment, just if it's the right or wrong thing to do, they're conflicted if it's a vote to respond to what they did or if it's a vote that has to do with tactical consequences going forward. Are they dealing with the past? Are they dealing with the present? Or are they dealing with the future when they make a decision, even if they can get over the hurdle that this is not some invasion with American troops on the ground? Mm-hmm. Is that the first question that's got to be answered? What's the point of this?
Right. I mean, I'd like to say first that I agree with the congressman. This is one great mess. You can count me in on that vote. Mm-hmm. I think ultimately, and this is obviously just my opinion, ultimately, that this comes down to the credibility of the president, and do we make our president an international lame duck with 3.5 years to go in the White House? And I don't think we can afford to do that. I don't think there are any good options here. I don't think this should have been done in the first place. But I think when he used the red line language and then he decided to go to Congress with it, I don't think Congress has a choice other than to back up the president. I think it's more dangerous than the possible ramifications, which are dangerous themselves, of doing a strike.
And there is a precedent issue that may come out of this in terms of not only the role of the president, but the power of the president right now. And listen, I think he mishandled this, the president. I thought last Saturday, I said that to everybody last night or on Tuesday, I had the suit in the back of my car. I figured I was coming in. He was going to say something at the Rose Garden, and the tomahawks would start raining down in Syria. And then all of a sudden, never mind, I'm going to go back to Congress. No rush. We'll debate this stuff when everybody fully gets back.
2 quick points. President Reagan went into Libya right away and sent a message and changed behavior. Bill Clinton went into the Sudan right away and changed behavior.
But he
And
didn't go to
Bosnia,
Somalia
too.
right away, or I'm sorry, to Bosnia right away. He did get, wasn't there congressional approval on Bosnia?
There was, but I think we had already been involved.
Yep. So the question then becomes, what do we want to entrust our president with and not going forward? I think he's hurt not only his presidency, but also potentially future occupants to say, and I'm curious your take here, should you guys have had a vote on this?
Well, the answer was we ultimately had a vote. I voted against going to Bosnia because I just felt that he didn't define how long would be there. You know, we did learn some lessons. We've got to. But the bottom line here is I heard the Secretary of Defense say I'm asking for authorization, but the President has already said whether this happens or not.
Act already gave it to me
No,
now.
so he already has the authority. He should have used the word, I'm asking for your support. The President already has the authority.
You know, I like Congressman Meeks, but there was a part in the interview, Dominic, where he said two things that struck me towards the end. He goes, well, if he does it again, then he uses chemical weapons, that might be, for me, a game changer. And if he goes across the border and uses chemical weapons, and I said to myself, hold on. They've already told us this isn't the first time he's used chemical weapons. Some people put it at more than a dozen times here, but it's been numerous times already. And secondarily, how is it worse if he uses it in a military action across the border, but he doesn't kill 400 to 500 people, women and children in his own region, and more than 1,000 all told? We're now making these judgments about, well, chemical weapons are bad, but if you cross a border, they're worse. Or what's the magic number of times you can use it? I just get the sense when you hear congressmen, and senators for that matter, they're all debating what we're debating about. We're not even on the same page as to what's the question. Is it the question it's the right response? Is it the question here is the consequences going forward? Is it the president's right to do this or not? We can't even get on the same page what we're fighting about.
But Richard, let me try and flip this and if I may, and ask a question of you. The congressman raised a good point, and Bill, everyone's raised a good point as far as there are no good options here. Okay, so let's start with that premise. And then let's consider possible blowback on Israel. Do you really want the president just jumping for the sake of jumping with our greatest ally in the area at stake? I mean, what?
My answer to that would be twofold, which is, first off, he's not jumping to jump because internationally we all agreed, as much as they want to say it was some throwaway line by the president, that chemical weapons were a red line that couldn't be crossed and carried consequences with it. And secondarily, I can make the argument to you, if there isn't a response to this, what's the message we send to every despot that's out there that we now don't have the stomach to follow through on a threat? Right. And they will read weakness to the point the congressman raised, which people would. Saddam went into Kuwait. We can go into case by case where despots out there read these symbols more than we think they do and interpret where we will or won't react going forward. I think there's consequences for action and inaction. No matter how you do it, we agree that it's a mess. I don't think us saying never mind makes us any safer. And
I think the real elephant in the room here is still the Iranian nuclear program.
Elephant for donkey in this room?
So he gets, we get, yeah.
But I mean, the real question is the Iranian nukes, and that's what everybody's looking is. Will the United States or will Israel, particularly the United States, take out those weapons?
Well, just as a reminder, if I could, Ralph, could you bring up the map for me of the region for a second? And I'd like you to do, if you could, for us, Congressman, a quick 101 here. Where everybody's talking about is, and by the way, we've had more than 2 million Syrians who have fled the region, including, just think about how bad things are, when 500,000 of them flee to go into Iraq.
And a million children.
Exactly. So beyond the humanitarian crisis that's unfolding before our eyes, Congressman, talk about the concerns beyond just what we do to Damascus or the surrounding areas, about the areas outside of this, on why this is such a tinderbox right now, and why whatever decision we make does carry implications.
Well, you have 27 different factions. If we go in, we will make lots of enemies. Even our friends will be angry at us.
Even though the Arab League said that Syria was bad guys.
Iraq has been supporting Iran in allowing Syria to get the weapons it needs. Turkey's taken a position against the Syrian leadership, so that Jordan is just unhappy with having so many refugees, and Israel must be on pins and needles, and Lebanon has been primarily controlled by Syria, and you got Hezbollah there. So
other than that, it's fine.
And then throw Turkey into it, too.
Yeah. But aren't our three principal constituencies we care the most about in the U.S. is, rightly or wrongly, the Egyptian military, Israel, of course, and the Saudis. And they're looking for some policeman role for us to take here to let people know that there will be consequences when you cross these lines.
Well, I'm kind of tired of countries in the Middle East that ask us to do things privately and publicly they criticize us.
Well, they're afraid for their own safety if they go public in that position.
Well,
of what
that's true.
Of what the groups who would like to see Assad overthrown, or even those who would support him, what their reaction would be. They're afraid that it would undermine their own stability, particularly in Jordan. Saudi Arabia is always worried about upheaval in their country.
So that's true, but that notwithstanding, they tell us privately to do it, and then they publicly criticize us. Yeah. And there's got to be a point where they just say, you know what?
Everybody seemingly wants it both ways when it comes to what we do. I love the French. Hey, you got to do this, but you guys do the fight, right? It's just, anyway. We turn to a break here. When we come back, we had an interesting conversation this morning. What if Congress votes no? What does the president do then? And if he follows through by saying, I don't need their authorization, I go in, then what do the Republicans do in Washington? We're going to get into that conversation and more after this. You see our question, everybody. We're bringing you into it. What happens if Congress does vote no, and right now the betting money is they will? Should the president act anyway as promised? Stay with us. We'll get to more of your reaction and our conversation.